I've taped around the edge to get a really nice white border at the end, but you could use masking tape if you don't have any framing tape, which is what I used here. I've mixed up a very dark green and I'm using a flat synthetic brush. I'm using black and green mixed together and I'm carefully painting around the daffodils, and I've drawn them with an HB pencil. And I'm just going to take my time now painting around them, really loading my brush. Acrylics dry very quickly, so I've made myself a stay wet palette. So I've got just a plastic box. I've lined it with some damp kitchen towel, but you could use a J cloth or something like that. Just keep it wet, not too wet, because it almost dilutes your acrylics, but you want it damp, and then you can put greaseproof or parchment paper there, squeeze on the acrylics, and it keeps them from drying out. But of course, when you're painting, they can dry out. So keep loading that brush if you want to blend. Now, just to let you into a little secret, I've actually painted this upside down by accident. I got a bit confused with the photo, as you can see there. So I'm actually giving them stems where they shouldn't be. So I hope that doesn't put you off too much. But yeah, they look quite nice this way though. That's what I thought. So it fooled me, because you can almost turn this photograph upside down and have a look at it the other way. But anyway, ignore the stems, just carry on painting the darks. I was just getting a little bit clever, and I'm using the edge of the brush. You know, you can use the flat of the brush, but you can also use the edge to get really thin lines. You're almost printing with it. Try to vary these darks. You can add a little bit more black or add a little bit more green, even a smidge of yellow, just to add a tiny bit of a mid-tone in there. But just keep loading your brush and painting around. And here we are. I've mostly finished painting the darks here. I've swapped to a smaller brush for those fiddly areas where it's tricky to use a larger brush to paint around. Now you're probably all sitting there in horror because I've got my flat 1-inch brush in my pot of water. Now, as I said earlier, acrylics dry quickly. I don't want them to dry on my brush, and that's the reason why I've kept it in water. The only other way around it is to rinse your brush each time you're not using it to make sure you don't have any acrylics on it. But I work very quickly. I don't have time for that, so that's why I leave it in the water. Bad habits, I know, but I'm just going to stick with it. But just to say, I've had that flat brush for quite some time and it still seems to be holding up really well. I know some brushes, though, the actual paint on the handles can peel, so it's up to you. I've given my painting a blow dry and just layering now with this little sort of 1/2-inch brush, flat brush, synthetic, and just putting a thin glaze of the yellow on. You can paint the yellow flowers first if you want these daffodils, or you can paint the background. I just wanted to paint the background because I just felt I could just see the flowers. So that's absolutely fine. As you can see now, I've turned it the right way up. So I'm just glazing and painting this on here using just any yellow will do really, but you could use a lemon yellow to begin with. Obviously the centers are warmer and I'll sort of work on that later, but I'm just painting now, just building up the yellow. And as you can see, what I do here for quickness and just to get lots of paint on your painting, I actually squeeze out the paint straight on the paper, breaking all the rules here. So I'm just sort of building up, just covering the yellow here, a little bit more yellow onto the paper, because it's I find some of the sort of cheaper acrylics, especially the yellows, they're quite transparent. So you almost need to layer up. But always have a little tube of Artist yellow and white, just for those final bits of an acrylic painting if your budget is a little tight. So you could build up with all the student quality and then just finish off with those sort of, well, especially the lighter colours with some tubes of Artist acrylic paint. So what I'm doing here is I'm mixing up yellow, red with a touch of green. It's just to paint some of these sort of shadowy colours on the sort of larger petals here. So I'm just painting this now, wet on dry. I've allowed my painting to completely dry. And I'm just going to build up the tonal values on these petals in a really kind of loose style. in the beginning stage of any painting, I believe, this is what I love to do, and I teach my students this, is just to keep everything loose. So I sort of think of it as a photographer who's sort of photographing his subject and it's a bit out of focus. And as you go into the painting, your painting becomes more and more into focus as you build up your painting. So depending on how sort of realistic and detailed you want your painting, you kind of can keep building towards that, just like the photographer would be bringing his subject into focus. I hope that kind of analogy makes sense. I love thinking of it that way. So I like to paint loose in an impressionistic style. It allows, especially for teaching purposes, it allows the student to be able to have the freedom to express their own creativity. I'm all about expressing your own style, giving you the sort of techniques and how you can build up, but really getting in touch with your creativity. I'm working on the centers now. I'm using a round, just a really little round brush here, and I've mixed a pinch of red in my yellow, and I'm just applying this wet on dry to the center here. Very, very loose, leaving a little bit of that underpainting there as well. And as you can see there, I'm using lots of paint. The more paint, the longer you have to blend as well. They don't dry as quick and it gives you a more time to work. But I'm just keeping this really, really loose, and I'm not trying to slavishly copy the photograph at all. I'm interpreting it. And a good way of doing that is to half close your eyes. It sort of gets rid of all the detail and it allows you to paint loose as well. I'm putting this orangey colour now very loose and creating marks on the inside of the flower here in sort of just vertical lines, keeping it really loose. I've actually added a touch more red to build up to make this sort of more of an orangey yellow colour. And I'm adding even more red just to put round the sort of the frilly bit around the centre here to kind of make it look 3D, so that it looks like it's the outside edge of this little trumpet of the centre here. And really be generous and just be freed up. It's so much fun. I want a little bit of shadow colour now. I'm actually putting the green in that orangey colour that I created and giving it a good blend, still using this small round brush. I'm just painting these sort of darker colours really, and I've just added a bit more dark green there. That was the black and the green mixed together, and what it does, it's creating this bit of neutral shadowy colour. If it looks too green, add a pinch of red, and if it looks too brown, add a little bit more of the green. It's just sort of trying to get that balance of that neutral colour. And it's really good exercise in colour mixing as well. I mean, really, I'm just sticking to primary and secondary colours here at present. So I'm just putting a little bit more of this shadowy colour now in the centre. And I'm not sort of creating an exact outline. I'm just sort of blobbing on marks and shapes. Remember, we're quite loose at this stage, not too much detail, just building up. I've actually used a little bit of water to dilute there as well, just to blend it out a little bit because the paint was drying very quickly. You can also use acrylic medium to do this as well. It's better for the acrylics as well, but if you're just starting out, water will be fine and it's good practice. So I'm just building up now the detail here, having fun. Again, half closing my eyes just to see that the centre's slightly darker, especially right in the centre where the top sort of area is sort of shading the centre part there. And I'm painting marks now around the edge to really start describing this daffodil. I'm adding artist yellow now onto the petals here, just to give a really opaque yellow, and just sort of really kind of having a look just to see where these lighter areas are. Take your time and be generous, especially if you're using the artist yellow. If you're using student yellow, you still find it quite transparent. Just add a pinch of white as well. Hopefully that will help out, or layer up. Wait for it to dry and then build another layer. That should help. For those of you interested in watercolour painting, I've actually produced a video that I painted these exact daffodils in, and I'll put a link for that in the description below. So I'm just carefully building up, painting the lights here, taking my time and enjoying the painting process. I hope you find it useful looking at this from the side, because you can really see the amount of paint I've got on there. I'm using, really loading the brush. I've got my little round brush here, and I'm using a little bit more red with the yellow, some lovely warm colours here to really describe these daffodils here. I've mixed up a bit more green in my yellow with a touch of the orange, to a little bit more red in there just to stop it from going green. And I'm just going to use this now just to paint a little bit more dark here just in the center. I think because the paint's still quite wet, it's kind of blending with the yellow there, but I'm persevering. If you find that's happening, you might want to give it a quick blow dry and then have another go at painting on these darks here. I'm even using my fingers to blend. Actually squeezed out a little bit of blue here, and I've mixed it with the orange and some white just to create this sort of neutral colour here for the centres. And I'm going to build up the other two daffodils in a very similar way, just sort of blending in this colour, using this neutral colour, the blue, the orange and the white, just to get this lovely neutral colour, and just blending it into the sort of the darker bit and then coming out lighter into the outside edge of the petals here. I'm using a very sort of warm orange now and painting around the edge, just because it does look kind of warm around the outside edge there, and I'm sort of describing that sort of frilly edge here, still using this little round brush. And you can dry off the painting before you start doing this, so it doesn't get on that sort of much more neutral shadow colour that you painted, or that I painted earlier. So I'm actually going to build up some shadow now on the sort of main petals. So you can use some yellow, a touch of blue and some white. Just play around with those neutral colours. If it looks too green, add a touch of the red. But when you look at the petals, they are kind of a greeny greyish colour. So, you can just blend that in. And if it goes wrong, the beautiful thing about, or the wonderful thing about acrylic painting is you can just paint over the top. And as you saw there, I put some white paint as well for some highlights on the leaves as well. I couldn't resist. I'm mixing up some white in this sort of yellowy orange colour, and I'm just painting in the centre here as well. And you can wait for your acrylic painting to dry before you do this, because it will really kind of stand out from the paint underneath. If the paint's wet still, it will blend with your colour underneath. So I'm really giving my brush a good rinse here now, and I'm going to mix up some green. The background looks very dark, almost too dark, very overpowering. So I'm going to mix up some lovely lighter green here, and any green will do. I've added some yellow. I'm just going to paint in some of the stems, even though I did it upside down before. Whoops. But again, the beauty of acrylics is you can just paint over the top and disguise all of that. So I'm just putting in some stems and leaves in the background as well. There are some daffodils in the background, but I'm just concentrating on these three here in the foreground. I'm going to leave the leaves for now. I'm just painting on some lights here on the top part, and it really brings out the dark as well and makes the trumpet part of the daffodil a lot more 3D. So it's the patience that you've got to, when you're in painting, don't sort of rush. build up from dark to light with these acrylics so you can really bring out the detail. I'm still keeping it really nice and loose. I like this style, this impressionistic style. So if you want to make it more detailed, just carry on homing in on the details here. But I've decided to finish. I'm removing the framing tape to reveal a lovely white border. And I'm really pleased with this painting. I've always wanted to do this one in acrylics after I painted it in watercolour, so I'm really pleased. But I thought I'd give it a little spatter. It's something I love to do. It stops me from fiddling, and it adds a little bit of sparkle and light as well to finish off the painting. But you don't need to do this. I really hope you've enjoyed this tutorial and that it inspires you to get your acrylics out and have a go at painting some daffodils. I really hope you've enjoyed this, and if you'd like to see more tutorials like this, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel where you will get updates of my latest videos. And if you have any questions, please put them in the comments section below and I will try and get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you again for watching. Happy daffodil painting. Bye for now.